Imagine being told that, the most effective way to short-circuit a lethal, life-destroying opioid addiction isn't found in some high-tech, multi-million-dollar American hospital wing.
Right, yeah.
Instead, it involves a potent, naturally occurring alkaloid derived from a shrub native to West Africa, and it's administered under heavy medical supervision in a specialized clinic on the coast of Mexico.
I mean, it sounds like a premise from a speculative fiction novel, really.
It totally does. But today, we're looking at a medical reality backed by decades of alternative clinical data. Welcome to a very special PlacidWay Pulse edition of this deep dive.
It is a profound paradigm shift. And, if you are tuning in right now, you are likely part of a family or supporting a loved one who has just been completely ground down by the search for a viable addiction treatment.
Absolutely.
We know you understand the sheer exhaustion of cycling through standard traditional rehab models that, they often yield diminishing returns.
Yeah, the late night internet research spirals, just trying to find something, anything, really, that actually alters the neurological grip of severe dependency.
Which is exactly why our mission for this deep dive is to act as a highly focused spotlight. We are unpacking the logistics, the rigorous underlying science, and the absolute non-negotiable safety requirements of Ibogaine therapy in Mexico.
And to do this, we're synthesizing some very comprehensive sources today. We have detailed patient guides, cardiovascular safety protocols, and clinical outcome data straight from the new Path Ibogaine clinic, which is located on the Baja Coast.
Right, and we are cross-referencing all of that with massive global healthcare facilitation data from PlacidWay Medical Tourism.
Exactly. But before we delve into the actual pharmacology, we have to establish a very firm baseline for this entire analysis.
Yes, this is crucial. The goal today is absolutely not to promote a magic bullet. I really cannot emphasize that enough, and our sources are equally clear on this.
No miracle claims here.
Exactly. We are not stating that Ibogaine, or honestly any medical intervention, simply cures addiction overnight. Addiction is a chronic, highly complex neurobiological and psychospiritual condition.
It requires lifelong management.
Right. It's not a quick fix.
Yeah, I mean, there is no USB drive you can just plug into the brain to delete the addiction software.
Right.
We're looking at this through the lens of expanding a critical toolset.
Precisely.
The conversation today revolves around how medical tourism is providing families with access to heavily structured, incredibly rigorous medical alternatives, options that might be legally or financially inaccessible in their home countries.
We are examining a powerful biological reset, not some mythical cure-all.
Okay, let's unpack this. A biological reset is the perfect way to frame it. So if we look at the clinical data regarding the pharmacology of Ibogaine, we really need to strip away the mysticism that often surrounds plant medicines.
Right, and just look strictly at the mechanics.
Yeah. So in pharmacological terms, Ibogaine is classified as an NMDA receptor antagonist. Wait, hold on. NMDA receptor antagonist. If I remember my biology correctly, N-methyl-D-aspartate receptors are basically the brain's primary learning and memory pathways.
Yes, you've got it.
And they run on glutamate. So if you are antagonizing or blocking these receptors, you're fundamentally intervening in how the brain remembers it, is addicted.
That's exactly what's happening on a cellular level.
It's like, think of opioid addiction, like a deeply carved wagon rut on a muddy road. Every time the person uses the wagon wheels, carve that rut deeper and deeper.
Reinforcing those neural pathways.
Right, until it's physically impossible to steer the wagon out of it.
That is a remarkably accurate biological metaphor. Over time, heavy opioid use forces the brain to drastically downregulate its own natural endorphin production.
Because it's adapting to the drugs.
Exactly. The brain adapts to the massive influx of exogenous opiates. The ruts get so deep that when you remove the substance, the brain is essentially screaming in chemical agony.
Which manifests as the brutal physical symptoms of withdrawal.
Right. The nervous system is just misfiring constantly because the baseline has been fundamentally altered.
So Ibogaine doesn't just pull the wagon out of the rut. If it's acting as an antagonist on those NMDA receptors, it's acting like a massive sudden snowfall.
Oh, I like that.
It fills in the ruts. It temporarily smooths out the entire road, interrupting that neurological feedback loop of panic.
And the clinical data we have notes that it also possesses dissociative and hallucinogenic properties.
Right, heavily comparing its underlying mechanism to anesthesia medications like ketamine, which also works on those NMDA receptors.
The comparison to ketamine is highly relevant, yeah, especially since ketamine infusions are also utilized in clinical settings like Path.
Okay, interesting.
The dissociative properties of Ibogaine mean the patient experiences a profound detachment from their immediate physical surroundings, their sensory input, and often, well, their own ego structure.
It forces an inward, often highly intense psychological review.
It does. But from a purely physiological standpoint, the critical medical outcome, the reason this specific alkaloid is so heavily sought after for detox, is that by agonizing these receptors, Ibogaine has been observed to dramatically reduce opiate withdrawal symptoms almost immediately.
It intercepts the chemical panic.
Yeah.
But here is the piece of data from the Path clinical files that I found absolutely fascinating. And it goes far beyond a 24-hour hallucinogenic experience.
You're talking about the metabolic process.
Yes. When you ingest Ibogaine, it isn't just in and out of your system. Your liver gets to work and metabolizes the primary compound into a secondary highly active metabolite called Noribogaine.
And Noribogaine is, arguably the true hero of this entire pharmacological process.
Why is that?
Well, the initial intense visionary state of Ibogaine might last 12 to 24 hours. But Noribogaine is highly lipophilic and has a remarkably long half-life.
Meaning it stores itself in the fat cells.
Exactly. It stores itself in the body and slowly releases over time. It stays in the system, continuing to bind to opiate and serotonin receptors. It elevates mood and, most crucially, curbs those intense, visceral cravings for up to several months.
Months. I really want you to pause and absorb the gravity of that timeline. If you have ever watched someone try to white-knuckle their way through opioid withdrawal, you know the cravings aren't just a fleeting thought.
No, they are a physical compulsion.
They override every logical function in the prefrontal cortex. So to have a biological buffer, a metabolite, that mutes those cravings for 3 to 6 months, that is a massive window of neuroplasticity.
It really is.
That is months of breathing room where a patient can actually engage in the psychological, cognitive behavioral work of recovery without their brain constantly screaming for fentanyl or heroin.
And the medical professionals at Path view that Noribogaine window as the critical integration phase. It is the biological reset that paves the way for genuine psychological healing.
Because you can't do the mental work if your body is in crisis.
Exactly. You cannot do deep trauma therapy when your nervous system is in a state of acute withdrawal. Ibogaine stabilizes the hardware so you can finally begin reprogramming the software.
But this immediately forces a glaring question.
Yeah.
If this specific alkaloid is so highly effective for managing severe, life-threatening withdrawal, and if it generates this months-long Noribogaine buffer against cravings, why on earth is it relegated to clinics in Mexico?
Right.
Why isn't this standard protocol at Mass General or the Mayo Clinic?
What's fascinating here is that it brings us to the complex intersection of pharmacology and international regulatory landscape.
The politics of medicine.
Yes. The primary reason it is not available in domestic hospitals, assuming you are in the United States, comes down to the DEA's scheduling system. In the U.S., Ibogaine is classified as a Schedule I substance.
Schedule I.
In strict regulatory terms, that label designates a substance as having a high potential for abuse and, quote, no currently accepted medical use.
Which is just a staggering bureaucratic contradiction. I mean, we are looking at a stack of clinical data demonstrating its efficacy in treating the very opioid epidemic that is currently ravaging the country.
Yeah.
Yet it shares a legal classification with the heroin it is being used to treat.
The irony is heavily documented, and it's frequently debated by neuropsychopharmacologists globally. Because of that Schedule I status, conducting domestic clinical trials is incredibly difficult.
It's prohibitively expensive.
Exactly, and fraught with red tape. It effectively halts the integration of this compound into mainstream North American medicine.
But other countries view it differently.
Right. The rest of the world does not operate under the jurisdiction of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration. In many countries, including Mexico, New Zealand, and parts of Europe, Ibogaine is either legal, available by prescription, or remains entirely unregulated.
So the DEA's classification has essentially gridlocked the research domestically, forcing a massive geographical shift in care. Families are looking at a map and asking, where's the science actually matching the legislation? And the data points overwhelmingly to Mexico.
It creates a very unique paradigm.
A paradigm where a highly viable treatment is legally inaccessible in one country, necessitating medical travel to a jurisdiction where it can be administered safely by certified doctors.
But we must attach a massive caveat to that geographical shift. Because Ibogaine acts as a profound system reboot, it is a heavy-duty medical intervention.
It's not a spa day.
Not at all. The sources are definitive on this.
Mm.
It requires extensive cardiovascular screening and professional continuous supervision. It taxes the heart.
Right.
This is not a casual weekend wellness retreat where you sip a brew on the beach and journal. It is a powerful pharmacological event that requires doctors, EKG machines, and emergency protocols.
And that transition from understanding the biological intensity of the medicine to understanding the logistics of where to get it safely brings up the massive, unavoidable elephant in the room: cost.
Yes, the economics of healing.
Let's dive deep into that. Because when families are investigating alternative treatments, especially after years of financial drain caused by chronic addiction, money is almost always a prohibitive barrier.
The financial devastation of addiction is just staggering. Families remortgage homes, drain retirement accounts, max out credit cards on 30-day traditional rehabs.
Rehabs that often have abysmal long-term success rates for severe opioid dependency.
Exactly. So when they start looking abroad, they are highly sensitive to pricing.
Now, the source material highlights that seeking medically supervised Ibogaine treatment in Mexico can cost 50 to 70% less than the highly luxury-focused executive models you might find in parts of Europe.
Or even the underground unregulated models attempting to operate in the shadows of the US or Canada.
Right. According to the new Path Ibogaine clinic data, their highly structured medically monitored treatment fees start at $7,800.
And we really need to dissect exactly why that massive price disparity exists. Because the immediate, deeply ingrained assumption, and it's a protective, understandable assumption, is that a lower cost inherently equals cut corners.
Yeah, we are conditioned by the U.S. healthcare system to believe that if a medical procedure is affordable, it must be dangerous or inferior.
The classic, you get what you pay for mentality.
But if we look at international medical economics, that logic completely falls apart.
Yeah.
The cost savings in Mexico are not derived from a lack of safety protocols, outdated equipment, or inferior medical staff.
No, they are a direct reflection of broader, massive macroeconomic realities. We are talking about avoiding the invisible malpractice tax.
And the catastrophic administrative bloat that artificially inflates every single line item in an American hospital.
That administrative bloat is the key factor. In Mexico, the baseline cost of living and the cost of operating a state-of-the-art facility are significantly lower.
Facility maintenance, administrative staffing, utilities.
All of it. The general operational expenses are a fraction of what they would be in Los Angeles or New York. Furthermore, because of the regulatory flexibility we just discussed, Mexican clinics are not suffocated by massive, multi-million-dollar malpractice insurance premiums.
Premiums that U.S. doctors must carry just to open their doors.
Exactly.
So it's not that Dr. Silva at New Path is less qualified than a doctor in Beverly Hills. It's that the physical building he operates in costs exponentially less to run. And he doesn't have a team of 20 medical coders fighting with health insurance companies all day.
They are leveraging a favorable macroeconomic climate to offer high-quality, intensive medical supervision at a fundamentally more accessible price point.
To contextualize that $7,800 figure from New Path, the facilitation data shows that comparable clinical programs in Europe can easily range from $15,000 to well over $25,000.
Often because they lean heavily into the luxury spa aspect, private chefs, horseback riding, high thread count sheets.
Rather than focusing strictly on the medical infrastructure.
Right. But the clinical guides provide a very important transparent caveat regarding that base price at New Path. The fees and the required length of stay, which ranges from 5 to 12 days, they are not universally flat.
They're dictated by the specific biological reality of the patient.
Exactly. The data categorizes treatments based on the root issue: psycho-emotional trauma, neurological disorders like Parkinson's, or active addiction.
And within that addiction category, this specific substance heavily dictates the protocol.
This is where we see the absolute necessity of a medical model versus a retreat model. The source explicitly highlights synthetic opioids. For patients arriving heavily dependent on fentanyl, methadone, or Suboxone, the medical complexity skyrockets.
Fentanyl has fundamentally altered the landscape of detoxification globally.
Because it doesn't behave like traditional heroin.
Right. Fentanyl is highly lipophilic, meaning it binds to and stores itself inside the body's fat cells, or adipose tissue.
Exactly. Because it stores in the fat cells, it leaches out slowly over weeks. The detox process is incredibly prolonged, volatile, and medically dangerous.
So a standard fast-track Ibogaine protocol simply will not work for a heavy fentanyl dependency.
It won't. If you administer Ibogaine while fentanyl is still leaching from the fat cells into the receptors, you risk precipitating severe, chaotic withdrawal or even dangerous cardiac events.
The clinic has to account for a much longer, heavily monitored stabilization and transition phase before the Ibogaine can be safely administered.
And that extended medical oversight naturally impacts the total cost and duration of the stay.
Which proves they are assessing the physiological reality of the patient, not just running a one-size-fits-all conveyor belt.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about how that billing is structured, because the bundled, or all-inclusive advantage, is a massive differentiator for medical tourism in Mexico.
In the North American healthcare model, we are subjected to a la carte billing. You pay a massive fee for the room, then weeks later you get a separate invoice for the blood panel,
A separate bill for the consulting cardiologist.
a separate bill for the anesthesiologist, and an absurd markup for the meals. It is a labyrinth of hidden costs.
The model championed by Path is entirely bundled. For that upfront price, the patient receives a comprehensive end-to-end package. And, importantly, it begins the moment they arrive.
The bundle includes airport pickup and dedicated round-trip transportation from San Diego across the border.
And from a patient psychology standpoint, that transportation element is massive. If someone is in the early stages of withdrawal, highly anxious and physically ill, the absolute worst scenario is forcing them to navigate international taxi routes or border crossings alone.
Providing secure clinical transport removes a massive layer of logistical panic.
The bundle then covers the comprehensive pretreatment medical assessments, the extensive cardiovascular blood work, the actual Ibogaine administration, continuous monitoring, private accommodations, specialized meals, and the crucial aftercare integration phase.
There are no surprise invoices for the core medical requirements.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Offering a transparent, bundled price is only half the equation. The far more critical question is whether the environment providing that bundled care is actually equipped to handle a sudden, catastrophic medical emergency.
And that forces us to draw a hard, highly uncomfortable line in the sand regarding the industry that has sprung up around this medicine.
We really need to fiercely contrast the rigorous medical standards of a clinic like Path against the spa retreat models heavily marketed online.
Because the term holistic has been deeply co-opted and, frankly, weaponized by some less scrupulous operators.
The source material is very direct about this danger. The underground explosion of interest in psychedelic therapy has led to a proliferation of operations offering these treatments.
Some maintain high standards, but others are essentially well-marketed wellness retreats operating far outside their depth.
The immense danger lies in operations that rely on glossy marketing, selling infinity pools, beachfront meditation, and luxury aesthetics, while entirely neglecting the critical underlying safety infrastructure.
If I am bringing a loved one who has a compromised cardiovascular system from years of injecting street narcotics, I could not care less about the thread count of the Egyptian cotton sheets or the organic juice bar.
Right. I need to know what happens if their heart rhythm becomes erratic at 2 a.m.
And that is the biological reality of Ibogaine. It is an intense cardiovascular stressor. It is known to cause bradycardia, which is a significant slowing of the resting heart rate.
And more dangerously, it can prolong the QT interval.
Let's break down the QT interval for a moment, because this is the exact detail families need to understand. Your heart beats via an electrical system.
Right.
The QT interval is a measurement, seen on an EKG, of the time it takes for the heart's ventricles to electrically discharge and then recharge, preparing for the next beat.
So if a substance like Ibogaine artificially prolongs that recharge time, it creates a window of electrical vulnerability. The heart is out of rhythm, and it can trigger a potentially fatal arrhythmia.
Exactly. It is a highly specific, highly technical cardiac risk. You do not manage a prolonged QT interval with deep breathing exercises, burning sage, or holding space. You manage it with continuous EKG monitoring, intravenous medical interventions, and highly trained cardiac personnel. This is precisely why Path explicitly states they operate strictly on a medical model rather than a retreat model.
And the data provides the receipts on their credentials. We aren't looking at a vague healing staff. We have verified names, histories, and certifications.
Yes.
The medical director is Dr. Carlos Silva. The clinical data notes he has been working specifically with Ibogaine since 2010.
That is over 14 years of highly specialized experience tracking the exact cardiac nuances of this specific compound.
Wow. And he is supported by a dedicated team of physicians, Dr. Paula Cabrera, who joined the field in 2012, Dr. Luis Garcia since 2020, and Dr. Juan Valdez since 2021.
Combined, this specific clinic boasts over 6 decades of dedicated experience in addiction treatment and complex detox management.
But here is the credential that absolutely separates a medical facility from a luxury spa. The sources state unequivocally that the entire medical staff is fully ACLS certified by the American Heart Association.
And more importantly, they possess real code blue experience in other settings.
That is the gold standard for emergency preparedness. ACLS stands for Advanced Cardiovascular Life Support. It is not basic CPR.
No, it is a highly rigorous set of clinical algorithms for the urgent treatment of cardiac arrest, stroke, and life-threatening medical emergencies.
And a code blue is a hospital emergency code indicating a patient is in active cardiopulmonary arrest. Their heart has stopped or they have ceased breathing.
It requires an immediate, highly coordinated response involving defibrillators, intubation, and emergency pharmacology.
By highlighting their real-world code blue experience, the doctors at New Path are communicating a vital message. They are saying, if the absolute worst-case scenario occurs, we do not freeze. We do not panic.
We have the muscle memory, the advanced training, and the crash carts to intervene, secure the airway, restart the heart, and save a life.
That level of preparedness is the defining line. It transforms a high-risk pharmacological event into a heavily mitigated, medically managed procedure.
And speaking of mitigating risk, the New Path data details a feature that is practically unheard of in the wider landscape of medical tourism.
The New Path No-Risk Guarantee. I had to read this twice in the source material because it is so incredibly rare.
It really is. Here's how it functions. A patient secures their treatment date with a $500 U.S. deposit, which is applied to the total cost.
Okay.
However, if the patient arrives at the clinic and within the first 24 hours they determine that the bedside manner, the facility, or most importantly, the initial medical withdrawal management is not up to their standards or is uncomfortable, they can leave, and they are not charged a single penny more.
From a clinical administration standpoint, offering a guarantee like that is a massive statement of institutional confidence. The first 24 hours of any opiate detox are historically the most volatile, aggressive, and miserable.
Patients are highly agitated, sick, and looking for any excuse to flee.
So for a clinic to say, we are so confident in our pharmaceutical stabilization protocols and our medical triage that we will take the financial risk of you leaving, it forces profound accountability.
It proves they are prioritizing immediate patient stabilization.
It entirely removes the paralyzing fear for a family, thinking, what if we fly down there, hand over a cashier's check for $8,000, realize it's a terrible fit, and we are financially trapped. You are not trapped.
It empowers the patient at their most vulnerable moment. And while we are discussing the breadth of their protocols, the sources also highlighted how they are integrating modern medical technology with diverse modalities to accelerate the healing process.
Right. Specifically, the data mentions the inclusion of hyperbaric oxygen therapy and 5-MeO-DMT, also known as toad medicine.
Let's look at the science of that integration. You have the intense pharmacological reset of the Ibogaine, which targets the opiate receptors and acts as the heavy artillery against the addiction itself.
And then they introduce hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or HBOT. This involves the patient breathing 100% pure oxygen in a pressurized chamber.
According to Boyle's law, that pressure allows the oxygen to dissolve directly into the blood plasma, completely bypassing the red blood cells.
The clinical result of HBOT is a massive acceleration in cellular repair. It rapidly reduces neuroinflammation, stimulates angiogenesis, which is the creation of new blood vessels, and promotes profound healing in the brain and vital organs.
When a body has endured the physical trauma, hypoxia, and systemic inflammation of long-term substance abuse, flooding the tissues with pure pressurized oxygen is a highly strategic recovery mechanism.
And then on the psychological side of the spectrum, they integrate 5-MeO-DMT. This is an incredibly potent, short-acting psychedelic compound.
Neurologically, it is known to temporarily suppress the default mode network in the brain.
The area responsible for our rigid sense of ego, rumination, and the self-destructive narratives common in addiction.
Exactly. It facilitates a profound, often non-dual or ego-dissolving spiritual breakthrough.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have a highly calibrated three-pronged approach. You achieve the physical receptor reset with Ibogaine, the rapid cellular and inflammatory repair with hyperbaric oxygen, and the deep psychological or spiritual breakthrough with 5-MeO-DMT, all bundled together under ACLS-certified monitoring.
It is a comprehensive physical, mental, and spiritual overhaul.
Which all sounds incredibly promising. But this brings us to a crucial pivot in our deep dive. Everything we have unpacked about the science, the economics, and the new path standard is vital.
But we have to give you, the listener, the actual pragmatic tools to verify this information yourself.
If you are investigating this route, whether you are looking at new path or comparing to another clinic in Mexico or Costa Rica, what exactly should you be demanding from these facilities before you ever book a flight?
You must become a ruthless advocate for yourself or your family member. The source material provides a very explicit, practical checklist for vetting these international facilities, designed to immediately weed out the marketers from the medical professionals.
And the very first item on that checklist is non-negotiable. Talk directly to the actual doctor.
Not an intake coordinator.
Yeah,
Not a high-pressure sales rep.
exactly. The source explicitly states that before making any financial commitment, you must demand a video consultation or a direct voice call with the specific physician who will be actively managing the medical care during the treatment.
The data from NewPath specifically notes that their communication lines are staffed by mental health professionals, not commissioned salespeople.
If a clinic insists that you can only speak to a booking agent and refuses to put the medical director on the line to discuss your specific cardiac history, you hang up the phone.
It is the absolute equivalent of demanding a consultation with a cardiothoracic surgeon before you let them crack your chest open.
You would never just hand your credit card to the hospital receptionist and hope that the guy with the scalpel knows what he's doing.
It is a critical boundary. The second point on the vetting checklist is verify the credentials. And this means pushing past the glossy website claims. Do not just take their word for it.
But how does someone practically execute that? If I am a frantic parent sitting in Ohio trying to save my son's life, how do I legitimately verify that a doctor operating 1,000 miles away in Baja, California actually has the credentials he claims?
The sources outline the exact mechanisms for this international verification. First, you ask for their national professional registration numbers.
Right.
In Mexico, legitimate medical professionals are heavily registered with the government, just as they are governed by medical boards in the United States. You can look these numbers up. Furthermore, regarding that crucial ACLS certification we spent so much time discussing, you demand to see the physical proof.
The QR codes.
Yes. The American Heart Association provides verified e-cards with specific scannable QR codes for every practitioner who successfully completes their life support algorithms. These are secure, digital proofs of certification.
A reputable, medically confident clinic will have absolutely zero hesitation emailing you those QR codes so you can scan them and verify their active status instantly.
If they make excuses about why they can't provide them, that is a massive red flag.
It is such a tangible, highly actionable piece of advice. Demand the QR code. The third critical point on the source's checklist is deeply understand their detox capabilities.
This circles back to our analysis of the fentanyl crisis and the severe limitations of a SPA model. You must aggressively question the clinic's medical director about their specific pharmaceutical protocols for complex withdrawal management.
If the patient is heavily dependent on long-acting synthetic opioids, you need to know exactly what short-acting stabilization meds, sedatives, or comfort protocols they utilize to keep the patient safe, hydrated, and stable for the days prior to the Ibogaine administration.
If their answer relies on vague, holistic terms like energy clearing rather than specific pharmaceutical interventions, they are entirely unequipped for severe medical detox.
Okay, I want to step into the shoes of the listener right now. I have this checklist. I know I need to demand a video call with the doctor. I know to ask for the AHA QR codes. I know to grill them on their fentanyl stabilization protocol. But I have to be honest. Even armed with this specific checklist, the sheer volume of noise online is deafening. There are hundreds of clinics aggressively competing for international patients in Mexico alone, let alone global hubs in Europe or South America.
It's overwhelming.
How does a regular family, already drowning in the trauma of active addiction, without a background in international medical law or cardiology, sift through all that SEO-optimized noise to actually find these verified professionals?
Yeah.
It still feels like trying to find a needle in a global haystack while the haystack is on fire.
That sense of being overwhelmed is the exact friction point where so many families abandon the search entirely. The burden of international medical research simply becomes too heavy while they are simultaneously managing a life or death crisis at home.
Yeah.
And that perfectly introduces the macro facilitation mechanism highlighted in our sources, PlacidWay medical tourism.
This is where we transition from understanding the specific treatment to understanding how to actually access the global infrastructure. The sources present PlacidWay not just as a directory, but as the ultimate logistical compass for families feeling lost in this international search.
To truly grasp the utility of PlacidWay, you have to look at the sheer scale of their operation. The facilitation data provided states they have actively managed and served over 945,367 patient requests since their inception in 2007.
Nearly 1 million patient requests. That number is staggering, and it's vital context. It indicates that medical tourism is not some niche, fringe, untested concept. We are looking at a massive, highly developed, heavily utilized global infrastructure.
PlacidWay functions as a global aggregator and a patient advocacy platform. Think of it as a highly specialized, medically vetted search engine. The danger for a family is going blindly onto Google, typing Ibogaine, Mexico, and praying that the algorithm shows them a reputable, ACLS-certified clinic rather than a clever, well-funded marketing scam.
PlacidWay circumvents that entire risk. So, mechanically, how does it actually function for the end user? If I am that overwhelmed parent and I go to PlacidWay, what am I actually able to do?
You are utilizing a centralized platform explicitly designed to let you filter, compare, and verify international medical data in one place. It allows patients to search for specific providers, compare the exact transparent breakdown of costs, explore different geographical destinations, and evaluate the specific bundles and medical packages being offered across thousands of global centers.
They have essentially done the initial massive heavy lifting of gathering and organizing the data so you can make an informed side-by-side comparison without having to navigate 50 different clinic websites.
And it is crucial to note the immense scope of what they cover. Just to give you a sense of scale, while our deep dive today has been hyper-focused on addiction treatment, the NMDA receptors, and new Path in Mexico, PlacidWay is coordinating highly complex care across the entire medical spectrum.
Looking at their data, they coordinate advanced stem cell therapy for degenerative neurological conditions, complex bariatric and weight loss surgeries, advanced reconstructive dentistry like all-on-4 implants, major orthopedic surgeries like bilateral knee and hip replacements, fertility treatments including IVF with advanced genetic screening, and comprehensive plastic surgery.
And they're coordinating these complex procedures across major, heavily regulated global medical hubs: Mexico, Turkey, Costa Rica, Spain, India, South Korea, and Thailand. It is a truly borderless healthcare network.
So if someone is listening to this deep dive right now and realizes that an international Ibogaine protocol might be the specific biological reset their family needs, what is the actual practical process on the platform?
The platform distills the overwhelming international landscape into a highly structured, manageable three-step methodology. Step 1 is simply to find medical and wellness centers globally using their specific search parameters.
You filter the database by your exact need, in this case, addiction care, or specifically Ibogaine therapy in Mexico.
So Step 1 is search and filter, eliminating the noise. Step 2 is to contact the provider directly. Through the secure PlacidWay platform, you can request free, highly customized quotes based on your specific medical reality.
You aren't just looking at generic starting prices.
No, you are inputting your situation, say, a complex fentanyl dependency, and gathering actual verified numbers from multiple clinics. This allows you to compare your options side by side.
You are gathering personalized, actionable data without committing a single dollar.
Exactly. And Step 3 is make an appointment. Once you have the quotes, you can communicate directly with the centers through the platform. This is where you deploy the vetting checklist we discussed.
You ask those tough questions, demand the AHA QR codes, schedule the video consultation with the medical director,
and figure out which facility is the absolute best fit for your clinical needs, your safety requirements, and your financial budget.
So what does this all mean? It fundamentally shifts the power dynamic. It means that families no longer have to navigate the terrifying, opaque waters of international healthcare alone in the dark.
You don't have to be a private investigator or an international lawyer.
You have a structured, massive platform that acts as a safeguard and aggregator to help you fiercely advocate for yourself or your loved one.
It transforms a desperate, scattered, panic-driven search into a structured, informed, and ultimately empowering decision-making process.
And that brings us to the culmination of this deep dive. We have covered a massive expanse of medical, economic, and logistical ground today. We started by looking under the hood of the intricate pharmacology of Ibogaine.
Understanding exactly how it acts as an NMDA receptor antagonist to physically interrupt the brutal ingrained cycle of opiate withdrawal.
And how its metabolic transition into Noribogaine provides that crucial months-long window of neuroplasticity and craving suppression.
We then pulled back to examine the macroeconomic realities that make Mexico a prime destination for accessing this care. We dismantled the myth that a lower cost inherently equals lower quality.
Explaining how the absence of extreme administrative bloat and malpractice taxes allows clinics to offer comprehensive, all-inclusive medical care starting at $7,800 US.
We took a hard, necessary look at the vital, life-saving difference between a luxury spa retreat and a legitimate medical clinic, highlighting the rigorous standards required at facilities like Path Ibogaine.
We looked at the absolute necessity of Philly ACLS-certified staff, real-world code blue experience, the transparency of specialized doctors like Dr. Silva, and the profound clinical confidence demonstrated by their no-risk guarantee.
And finally, we explored the practical, actionable steps of patient empowerment, providing the exact checklist needed to ruthlessly vet a facility.
And how utilizing a global aggregation platform like PlacidWay removes the guesswork, the anxiety, and the overwhelming noise, providing a safe, structured path to comparing your international options.
So, here is our extremely strong call to action for you. If you or your family or anyone you love deeply is currently trapped in the agonizing cycle of severe addiction, searching desperately for a treatment option that actually addresses the biological root of the crisis, hear this.
Do not search alone. Do not rely on random internet algorithms to dictate your medical future. Start with structure. Go to PlacidWay.com right now.
Use their massive, vetted platform to request a personalized, completely free quote and begin comparing your options safely with the support of a network that has helped nearly 1 million people navigate this exact journey before you.
And as we close, the sheer scope of this entire exploration raises an incredibly important, almost philosophical question.
This raises an important question, one that speaks to the very future of how humanity approaches healing on a global scale. In a world where medical innovation or the targeted utilization of specific highly effective pharmacologies like Ibogaine consistently outpaces slow-moving local or domestic regulations.
What does it mean for the future of healthcare, when the most effective, biologically profound treatment for a community's most devastating crisis might require crossing an international border?
How long can that disconnect between legislation and biological reality truly last? And ultimately, how will the massive, undeniable mountain of clinical data generated by global medical tourism eventually force a systemic change in our own rigid, localized healthcare laws?
It is a profound thought. Will the map eventually change to reflect the science, or will we always have to travel to find the right coordinates for healing? Thank you so much for joining us on this special PlacidWay Pulse edition of The Deep Dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, even when the system seems completely broken and the options seem exhausted, there are still brilliant minds, dedicated medical professionals, and powerful platforms out there ready to help you find your way out of the darkness and back to solid ground.